Roll Tide and welcome to this edition of Crimson Drive driven by NASCAR. This is Roger Hoover, glad to be with you once again on the Crimson Tide Sports Network as we have this show, Crimson Drive driven by NASCAR, for you on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Central. We'll be going to twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. during football season. But right now we're gearing up for the start of football practice because practice is starting today, really as we speak, on the Thomas Drew practice fields at the University of Alabama campus. So we're really excited for the start of Alabama football with its practice, and we'll be talking about that all throughout today's show. We'll go through the headlines for today that are presented by our friends at RJ Young. RJ Young is the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. They furnished us with this smartboard to go through all the different headlines for today, and we will start with the head coach of the Alabama football team, Nick Saban, as he met with the media yesterday for his Knicks Kids Luncheon. So talking about everything going on with Knicks Kids as well as Crimson Tide football. Then we'll be talking soccer with Wes Hart. Earlier this week, the Alabama soccer team started its preseason practice, and they have an exhibition game coming up on August 13th against Vanderbilt. The season begins on August 18th, so soccer season will be here before we know it for Alabama soccer. A good chance to catch up with Wes Hart coming up in just a bit. We'll also be talking football once again with John Talty, who's a senior sports editor and SEC insider for AL.com, and next week he's coming out with a book about Nick Saban, The Leadership Secrets of Nick Saban. So we'll talk about that book, plus what he's looking to see from the Crimson Tide this year. And then also we'll be hearing from the men's basketball team as they have a foreign tour coming up, going to France, going to Spain. They'll talk all about that coming up in just a bit. Other headlines for today, starting with the Crimson Tide football team, as again, fall camp will begin today at the Thomas Drew practice fields. Practice coming up tomorrow as well, and then there will be media day coming up on Sunday, where we not only get to hear from Coach Saban, but also the offensive coordinator Bill O'Brien and the defensive coordinator Pete Golding. First 20 practices in camp coming up today for the Crimson Tide, so it's going to be a very interesting month to see how this football team gets ready to try and defend its SEC championship 7 years in a row. Alabama's been the preseason pick to win the Southeastern Conference. That remains the same this year, and of course 19 players preseason all SEC, led by Bryce Young at quarterback and linebacker Will Anderson Jr. Other headlines for today, the Crimson Tide men's basketball team, as I mentioned, will have a foreign tour that will begin on Friday. That's when they'll depart the United States. 3 games are coming up next week, August 8th, 9th, and the 12th. First 2 games will be played in Barcelona, Spain. Game 3 will be in Paris, France. So a great tour coming up for the Alabama Crimson Tide men's basketball team. So many newcomers to this roster, a great chance for everybody to get to know each other better. Usually when teams go on a tour like this, the chemistry is off the charts once they return for preseason practice coming up in October. So really good stuff for Alabama. We'll be hearing from Nate Oats in just a bit. Other headlines around Crimson Tide athletics. The women's golf team announced its schedule for 2022-2023 after a great performance last year at the NCAA Championships. Rowing, as Kelly Kreis was named an assistant coach for Glenn Putre and the Alabama rowing team. I mentioned that preseason practice is underway for soccer. And a note from us here at the Crimson Tide Sports Network. It was announced by Alabama yesterday that Chris Stewart will be filling in for Eli Gold on play-by-play of Alabama football to begin the season, as Eli's been dealing with a few health issues. We certainly hope that he can make a speedy recovery and return to the radio as quickly as possible. But to at least begin the season, Chris Stewart will be calling play-by-play. We'll be talking more about that in the next few weeks as we get closer to the season. But Chris will also be on Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show on Thursday night starting on August 18th. So that was a note passed along yesterday by Alabama. Chris Stewart will be filling in for our friend Eli Gold, calling play-by-play of Alabama football. Nick Saban had a few comments about that as well yesterday as he met with the media as part of his Knicks Kids Luncheon at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Not only a note about Eli, but also on Knicks Kids and the Alabama football team as we get closer to the start of the season. Here's the Crimson Tide head coach, Nick Saban.
This is always one of my favorite days of the year, to have the opportunity to see that Knicks Kids is actually creating some opportunities for some young kids, maybe to have a little better quality of life, to thank all the people who actually help the kids have a better quality of life, and actually thank Miss Terry and her volunteers for doing all they do to help create the opportunities. So this is a special day for me. I think it's sort of an indication to me that to have our players here, to see this, to have compassion for other people, to give back to the community, to see our players, whether it's Mac Jones, Tua, or whatever, now have foundations that try to create the same opportunities. I think that's something that makes me very proud as well. So it's a great day for us, and we were building houses for national championships. Now we're building them for SEC championships. So I don't have any control over that part, though. Eli has done a fantastic job being the voice of our iconic brand at the University of Alabama for a long, long time. Our thoughts and prayers are with him and his family, and we certainly hope that he has a speedy recovery. He's a good friend, and he's been a great ambassador for the University of Alabama, and we appreciate all he's done more than you know. I think leadership is always really important on every team. I think we do have some good leadership on this team, but there's two parts of leadership. There's having good leaders, and then there's having people on the team who embrace the leadership and buy into the principles and values and things that are going to help them be successful as individuals, which really ultimately helps you be successful as a team. So I've been pleased with what we've been able to do, but the challenge is always being able to sustain against great competition, and we'll certainly have that throughout this year.
Good to start the show hearing from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban. We'll be hearing about him coming up in just a little bit with our conversation with John Talty. But right now, we want to go to the Alabama Soccer Stadium, where earlier in the week we had a chance to catch up with Crimson Tide soccer head coach Wes Hart. Is really excited that preseason practice is underway. First match will be an exhibition against Vanderbilt on August 13th, and then coming up on the 18th, it will be the season opener for the Crimson Tide on the road, as you'll hear about in this conversation with the head coach of the Tide, Wes Hart. Training's starting. The season's right around the corner. How's everything going?
Oh man, super excited. We sat around all summer waiting for this, and it was great to get the girls out there yesterday and see the hard work that they put in over the summer, and for us to be able to start up has been pretty exciting.
Making it to the NCAA tournament last year, a great spring after that, so many players returning for this year. How far ahead do you feel at this time of the year compared to maybe last year?
Oh man, it's awesome. For now, it's not as if we are relying on new players to come in and make an immediate impact or immediate splash. Although I do think we've got some players that are capable of doing that, but it's not like we're reliant on that. And so for us, returning every player from last year, we feel like we're in a very good place, and now it's just about just kind of fine-tuning some things and then just slowly integrating other players into it.
How much momentum do you feel like you have from a year ago, or is it truly a fresh start anytime you start a new season?
It's certainly you can't live off of what you did last year and what you accomplished last year, but I think going into it, there's an incredible amount of just confidence and optimism and excitement, knowing that that we had a good year last year and that we were returning every player and had a good spring. And so I think for us, going into it, knowing who we are, what we're all about, it's not as if we're trying to find a new formation or a new system or again reliant on new players. We've got everyone returning, and it's just about just kind of finding our groove back and getting fine-tuning things.
So big picture, how would you describe the style of play you want to have to begin the season?
Yeah, ultimately for us, we want to be a team that dominates, territory, dominates possession, dominates chances, and so we're going to be, the same team we've been in the past. We're not looking to change things. We want to be a team that defensively, we want to press high up the field so that we win it. We are closer to goal, and when we are in possession, our first thought is, how can we hurt our opponents? How can we be dangerous? And in doing so, you're going to see spells of us knowing that there is a time and a place to put our foot on the ball and slow things down and keep possession, and then at those right times, I think we're going to be ready to hurt opponents.
Let's take a look at your personnel for this upcoming season. We'll start from the back and kind of move forward, starting with goalkeeper McKinley Crone back once again.
McKinley's, she looks great right now, and she's a sixth-year senior, and so she looks like it as well. Just her presence and her confidence back there, she looks great, and we feel very good in goal.
How about the back line?
Yeah, back line again. Back line is intact. We're returning every player from last year, and then. We got Sasha Bella, at center backs. We've got at the wide spots. You've got Reina Reyes and Jessica Skorka. So that back line there, and then you've got a few new players that that are going to be able to come in and compete for playing time. So we've got a transfer from Northwestern, Marianne Nest, who's going to come in and potentially be a player that can play on the left side, which may free Reina up to go into the midfield or do something else with Reina. You've got Sid Yapich, who is a freshman coming in that could potentially play some center back. Brooke Steer is a player that's coming back from injury. She did not play last year. She's a freshman. Her primary position is forward, but we're going to try her in the back as well. She's got a lot of characteristics of what could be a good center back, so I think we'll mess around with her there too.
So really strong in the back, but also controlling the ball in the midfield. Who's going to be most important for you there?
Yeah, I don't know who's going to be most important. I think they all play different roles. You know, Macy Clem as a holding midfielder, you know, so good at just plugging up holes, winning balls. Her distribution, you know, particularly her switch in the field and long balls in behind. You know, got Felicia Knox, who's capable of playing kind of anywhere in that midfield, but just so, I don't know, composed, so creative, so calm on the ball. You know, I think she's kind of a link in there that you know, kind of you know, really kind of helps dictate the tempo of the game and just gives us you know, the ability to keep balls as well as you know, hurt people.
And then looking at your forwards, some opportunities for some goals. I know especially Ashlyn Sarepka back with 5 goals last year. You want to see some opportunities for her?
Yeah, absolutely. And Kate Henderson as well. I think she tied for the lead in goals. You know, but Kate's ability to get on the end of crosses and head balls, I think, is awesome. You got Riley Mattingly now coming back. So she was an all-conference forward 2 years ago and then sat out last year with the torn ACL. So, you know, getting Riley back into the mix, and she looks awesome. You know, she looks like she hadn't skipped a beat. And then, yeah, you got a new player coming in, Gianna Paul, who is by far the fastest player we've ever had. And so I think, you know, something that's, you know, been a staple of ours over the years is our ability to keep the ball. You know, the majority of our forwards have always been target forwards where we're laying balls off and we're getting wide and get behind it. But I think for the first time since I've been here, we truly have the threat and the ability to get behind opponents. And you'll see when Gianna plays, she is incredibly fast.
We're excited to see that. Who have emerged as some of the leaders of this team? I imagine that's a lot of carryover from last year,
yeah.
But is the leadership really strong right now?
Incredibly strong, and again, with so many people returning, I think we've got between seniors, fourth-year seniors, as well as fifth and sixth-year seniors, we've got 11 of them, and so, you know, it's kind of unusual for us. You know, we've been over the years, we've been kind of reliant on new players coming in and being immediate impact players for us, and you know, a lot of times, you know, you look back to 2019 when we had, I think, 7 freshmen starting, and you know, now they're all, you know, seniors now, and so now you've got a core group of players that you know, I think we're reliant on, you know, more you know, experienced players that have been there, players that have done that, as opposed to kind of, you know, having freshmen and sophomores carry the load. And you know, certainly the freshmen and sophomore will be incredibly important to us, but I don't think we're going to be, you know, asking them to carry us.
Well, with an experienced team, sometimes you feel a little more comfortable playing on the road. And for Alabama, a lot of time on the road is coming up. You have the home exhibition against Vanderbilt, and then start with the Florida trip.
Yeah, you know, an incredibly difficult schedule that we've set up. You know, two tough games out in Florida. You know, playing Florida Atlantic and Miami, and then coming home for a couple games, and then hitting the road again for you know, 7-day road trip in Utah. And so, you know, combining altitude as well as you know, very good opponents. That's going to be a tough stretch for us for sure. So we'll start with BYU on that Thursday, and I'm sure it's going to be an incredible environment. You know, probably 5,000-6,000 people, if not more, and the you know, I guess the NCAA runners-up from last year. So it's going to be a great game. And then Utah, who's got you know, a new coach there who I think is you know, is going to do some great things there. But they'll be a tough opponent on Saturday. And then Utah Valley, who we played last year. You know, they're a very good team. They typically, you know, win their conference or compete for their conference championship. So, you know, to play those 3 games in a 6 or 7 day span at altitude, I mean, it's not going to be easy at all.
Well, BYU, the national runner-up last year to Florida State, a program you've played a lot early in the season throughout your time here. Do you love those early challenges for your team? How much does that help in SEC play?
I think it's great. I mean, I think you got to find that balance of trying to, you know, be successful and create, you know, confidence for your team. But at the same time, if you're only playing easy games, you know, I think that confidence can sometimes be false. You know, so I think it's important to play the Florida States or the BYUs or the Clemsons or, you know, some of these teams that we've had on our schedule, you know, over the years early early on, and I think it's a good measuring stick. I think they'll expose some areas and show you some things that you need work on. And it starts for us with the exhibition against Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt is an excellent team, and I think within a week of preseason, we're going to find out some things about us and some things that we need to work on.
Stands are empty here at the stadium right now, but once Vanderbilt's in town, or some of the 9 home matches you have, what kind of atmosphere do you want here in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that with the success of last year and some of the excitement and buzz around the team, I'm hopeful that we can get some fans out here and cheering us on. So I know the games that we've had it. Last year LSU in particular, it helped because it was a Friday night game and we don't have a lot of those. But most of our games are going to be Thursdays and Sunday nights. But if we can get crowds like we did against LSU or Auburn last year, I think it's going to help us tremendously.
We look forward to it. Coach Hart, thank you for joining us. Roll Tide.
Thanks, Roger.
Good luck to Wes Hart and the Crimson Tide soccer team, as again, they just started preseason practice this week here in Tuscaloosa. And coming up over the next few weeks here on Crimson Drive, we'll be hearing from a few members of the Alabama soccer team, including McKinley Crone, who's back at goalkeeper this season, as well as Felicia Knox and Ashlyn Sarepka, who should be scoring a lot of goals coming up this fall for the Alabama Crimson Tide. We're, of course, getting in that football mindset during the first week of August, and John Talty covers college football as well as anyone in the country, as he is the SEC insider for AL.com. He's also the senior sports editor for that website and newspaper, and he's also going to be out with a new book titled The Leadership Secrets of Nick Saban, a really deep dive into Coach Saban's background, not just here at Alabama, but all throughout the coaching stops he's had, both as an assistant and as a head coach. And it's a really fascinating look at the head coach of the Crimson Tide. So we're pleased to be joined this week by John Talty. First of all, are you excited that we're almost there to book release date for this new book on Nick Saban?
Yeah, it's fun because I feel like not only is the book about to come out, but I feel like football season's about to start. So it's kind of that nice football feels like it's coming back. And so it's exciting that we're about to have fall camp, books about to come out. We've gotten through that period of nothing happening. Football is here. So it's an exciting time, and I'm just super pumped and excited for people to get this book in their hands and start reading it.
What was the spark of all this for you to come out with this book?
Yeah, so it's been an idea that I've had for a long time. And I've always believed that, especially super successful leaders like Nick Saban, that there's something in what they do that I think is translatable outside of just what they do. And so whether that's a Steve Jobs type, you can go, Thomas Edison, whatever it might be, I think there's something in what they do that led to that success that you could use in your everyday life. And so I've always had this belief. And people have told this to me for years, like you could make Nick Saban a Fortune 500 CEO and he would kill it. And I've always believed that too. And so I wanted to see, was there a way of kind of distilling down what he does in a way that not only will appeal to college football fans and Alabama fans, but also people who are just interested in maybe getting an edge as a leader, as a business person, whatever it might be. And that's kind of how I went about writing the book, and was happy that as I got to the end of it, I felt like it checked out. There's a lot that he does that I think people could do in their everyday life to improve, in a number of different ways.
Does it really all start with the small details for Coach Saban and then the consistency to always check that all those details are complete?
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that you can say, this is what it takes, but it actually takes that every single day. And it's a lot easier said than done. There's a lot that he does. We talk about the process, which has been talked about and written about so much over the years. At its core, not that difficult of a concept, right? It's focusing on the process, not the results. It's focusing on doing what it takes every single day to get to that place, and not just focusing on getting to that place. But to actually live your life that way every day is incredibly challenging. And I think that's one of the areas that Nick Saban excels at is, like you said, the attention to detail, the organization, the efficiency, the accountability, all these different kind of core parts of the operation are necessary. And if any one piece was missing, it might not run the way it does. But when you're inside that Alabama football building, like people are working to peak efficiency in September, in July. I mean, it doesn't really matter. They are all pulling their weight, and it's all because of the pace that he establishes and the standards that he establishes. And anybody who's ever worked for Nick Saban will tell you that if you're not meeting those standards, he will hold you accountable. There's no, it's fine, like he's doing okay. If you're not doing what he needs to do, you're going to know about it, and you're either going to fix it, or, you might look for employment elsewhere. And that's a really important part of why they've been so successful.
Yeah, as you mentioned, a lot of these leadership secrets apply to all the different areas of business and in life. But for Coach Saban in his life, one of the biggest things is recruiting. And you already have an excerpt from the book available now on AL.com about the recruiting operation, specifically when he arrived in Tuscaloosa in 2007. Just what did you enjoy learning about those early days of the Nick Saban era as he started to build this Alabama dynasty?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest keys to his success is how he has emphasized recruiting. Again, we can say recruiting is important in college football. Yeah, of course. But, the way that he works on it every single day, I can guarantee you, as somebody who's covered college football for a while, not every coach is doing it that way. Not every coach is grinding the way that Nick Saban grinds every single day. And I love that, in that excerpt that you talked about, I love that scene in the very beginning, first meeting he has at Alabama, and he establishes what the expectations are from the very beginning. And he says, everything we do is about recruiting. So everybody knows. And not only is that such an important message for him, but the people that he included in it, it wasn't just the offensive coordinator, his recruiting guy. He had, staffers, he had the janitors, he had the secretaries, because he wanted every single person who works in that building to be on board with the mission. And so he even says, if a recruit walks in here and the place looks dirty, they might not like what we do. They're going to think something about it. Like, it has to be show ready 100% of the time. To the secretaries, if a recruit's mom calls in, if you don't answer the phone a certain way, they're going to think that we run things a certain way and not want to come here. And so he had to get every single person on board with that mission. And I think it's such a critical moment for what he ended up building, was getting from day one everyone to know, in order to succeed in college football, we have to recruit at a certain level. And that's going to take every single person who works in this building being all in on that mission. And if you look at the success he's had, obviously that worked.
Well, on the field, a lot of people point to how Coach Saban was able to modernize Alabama's offense, 3 national championships kind of one way, and then several more going to a different offensive style. So he's been able to adapt, and that's been key as part of his leadership. Have you seen that throughout the organization as well, whether it comes to recruiting or now dealing with name, image, and likeness, just that ableness to adapt? Has he been able to work that into all areas of the organization?
Absolutely. And so one of the chapters in the book is called Evaluate, Constantly, Evolve When Necessary. And I think that's been one of Saban's, one of the things that he's done really well is that he's always looking for an edge, whatever it might be. He's never someone who is so stuck in the ways that used to work. I think, people have told me, coaches and players, one of the things that he gets the most upset about is if he asks somebody, hey, why are we doing this? And the answer is, well, that's how we've always done it. That's when he's like, that's not a good enough answer. If it's not successful, why are we doing it? And so he's always looking to find these little edges. And you've seen, tremendous evolution from him in a number of different areas. I think the most famous one is probably, how he's embraced the offensive revolution and, initially being against it and, going the whole other direction. I think we've seen it, the transfer portal, we've seen it with recruiting. And I think we've seen it also with just his personality and style. Some people point to it being, he's aged a little bit, he has grandkids, but I also think he's realized that the way that current athletes need to be coached and recruited is a little bit different than how he started out. The way his first team in 1990 at Toledo was coached cannot be the same way he coaches in 2022. And so I think we've seen people have stressed to me, he's not soft, for the record. He's a little softer, but we've seen a little bit of a friendlier, more fun, I think, Nick Saban evolve out of the last couple of years. And I think that's been purposeful as he's tried to show a different side of himself.
What you learned about his approach to the media in reporting for this book?
I think it's fascinating. I think it's, being on the side of interacting with him as a media person, but also trying to understand, why he does things. I think the number one thing that I would say is that he doesn't do anything by accident. This is someone who plans out what he wants to say. He has note cards. He'll work. He can be giving a speech to the Boy Scouts. He can be doing an interview on ESPN. He's going to prepare the same way. He's going to want to know what might be asked, who am I talking to, and what message am I trying to instill in this platform. And so, you realize when he talks, we love the Nick Saban rants, right? Those are purposeful. He's not just randomly going off. He knows he has to send a message, and it's usually reinforced in the locker room too. So the one that I always think about is whenever they're about to play an FCS opponent, we're waiting on somebody to ask, are you going to play the younger players this week? And he knows it's coming and he wants to go off on it and he has it set up. And he knows, I think what's so smart about him is that he knows, especially in our current media ecosystem, if Nick Saban goes off on a rant, it's going to be written about at AL.com. It's going to be on SportsCenter. It's going to be on TikTok. It's going to be on Twitter. He realizes he can't just reinforce in the locker room. He's got to find the players where they are. And so they'll go on Instagram, they'll see the latest Nick Saban rant, and it's just, they're hearing the message again. And just another smart way of reinforcing his message with his players. I think he's really smart with how he handles the media.
So to prepare for this book, you've talked to a lot of people. We're doing a lot of reporting. We're able to talk to Coach Saban and get some insights from him specifically.
So what's interesting about Nick Saban is he wrote a book, I think back in 2004. I think it's the last time he has been involved in a book. And so, we kind of pitched it to him. I think he's busy with doing what he's doing, which I completely understand. And so I tried to just focus on as many people who have known him for a long time as possible to try to give me as good insight into him as possible. And I've also, I've covered Alabama for, 8 or 9 years at this point. And so I feel like I had a pretty good baseline to what I wanted to do.
Did you enjoy the perspectives from people that knew him maybe back in the Toledo days or even further back in his coaching tenure to seeing what he's become at Alabama and the type of coach that he is?
Yeah, those were some of my favorite interviews, honestly, because I think some of that stuff, again, it's before he was who he is now. Now he's the GOAT. He's the greatest college football coach of all time. But I'm always interested in people before they become famous, and I was kind of fascinated. The first chapter of the book is actually about him starting at Toledo and about, having to turn around that program and how he was able to have success in his first year. And it's so fascinating to see kind of what he was back then. I mean, he's still a hard charging guy now, but you can imagine in his 30s, Nick Saban trying to prove himself. He was not to be messed with back then. And some of the stories were pretty funny that those guys told me. And I think that their perspective is so great too, because a lot of them have followed what he's done since, and they'll tell me I can see he had it. He just hadn't fully figured it out yet. He still was a little rough around the edges when we had him, but it was kind of the same message. He has just figured it out better, and obviously he's figured out some different things along the way. But yeah, I mean the Toledo and Michigan State stories in particular, some of the stories those guys had, I think were some of my favorite in the entire book.
Another important part of his life was getting to work with Bill Belichick with the Cleveland Browns. And we've always heard about Coach Saban, Coach Belichick, so similar. HBO did a whole documentary about that. If you were to focus on a leadership style book of Bill Belichick, how similar do you feel like it would be to the book you wrote on Coach Saban?
I definitely think there's a good amount of overlap between those two guys. And I think Nick Saban has certainly credited, Bill for, helping him a lot. I think he picked up a lot of ideas when those two worked together with the Cleveland Browns. I think you see that the most with, even though he doesn't call it this, Belichick's famous "do your job," I think is something that you certainly see throughout the Alabama organization of guys focusing on exactly what their job responsibilities are and not worrying about what else is happening throughout the organization. So I think that's a core tenet of what Alabama does, even if they don't call it that. But I think personality wise, those guys are different. I also think one of the things that, people talk about Nick Saban in the NFL, and obviously he had a stint with the Dolphins, but I do think there is something interesting about, Belichick, and certainly the famous relationship with Tom Brady. There is something that's a little different in having to, manage a guy potentially for 15, 20 years, whatever it might be. Whereas, Nick Saban is, going through guys every 3 to 5 years. And so I would be curious to, having to study Belichick and how he manages that aspect of it, and what works best for him in terms of managing those relationships. But I think the other key thing is, as we talked about earlier, so much of Saban's success is his daily emphasis on recruiting, and that's not quite the same in the NFL. And so I would be, I'd be curious to what maybe, besides preparation, which obviously Belichick does a lot, what maybe replaces the recruiting stuff for Belichick that he's focusing on beyond just the daily preparation that those guys do.
Switching gears to this Alabama football team, as practice starts this week here in Tuscaloosa, just what are some key questions that you have and your AL.com team is going to be covering in the early days of Alabama's football camp?
Yeah, so we know this team is highly regarded. I think a lot of people are going to pick them to win a national championship, and for a lot of reasons why. I mean, they'd be my pick as well. But I think if you were to focus on more of what are the question marks that we have about this team headed into the season, what maybe needs to be fixed, I think the two areas that I would look in are offensive line. Obviously that was a work in progress throughout last year. They brought in some different pieces. How does that unit kind of coalesce together over the course of fall camp leading into the season? And then number two is just, I think, looking at the defensive secondary, bringing in some highly regarded guys. Eli Ricks, how does he fit in? I think Nick Saban has had some telling comments so far about, Eli and what he needs to do to be able to play. And so, curious to see what he's able to do during fall camp. But there's a lot to be excited about with this team. Obviously, when you return, in my opinion, the two best players in the country, that's a pretty good starting point. And so there's not a lot of flaws. You got to work just to find those two. So it's more just, I think, just getting excited about the season and just seeing how, those two areas, how they get worked out over the next few weeks.
You also extensively cover the SEC and have had your finger on the pulse of a lot of the realignment talks that have been going on the last couple of years. Could we see any movement across realignment across college football before the season begins, in your opinion?
I feel like it's slowed down at this point. I don't want to pull a Bob Bowlesby and say, like, I'm not worried about realignment and the next day it happens. You got to be careful because things can happen at any moment. But it feels like, from what we've seen just between the SEC and then now the Big Ten, it feels like there is a quick strike out of nowhere. Everyone freaks out. We talk about all the potential impact, things slow down, and there aren't quite as many ramifications as we thought. I mean, there was a moment when USC and UCLA went to the Big Ten, you thought, all right, is the Big 12 going to rate them? And then it's kind of calmed down right now. They're all kind of staying in their spots. So I think it's going to continue to hang over college football. I don't think we're done with realignment, but it at least feels like with football season about to start here, it might quiet down for a bit as people figure out what their next move is. And as always, I think it comes when you least expect it. It comes out of nowhere. And so, I think we might see something in the future, but it at least feels like, we can start to focus on what we actually all love, which is college football, which we're a few weeks away from it here.
So maybe that's going to quiet down, but how about for you? Any book writing quieting down? Or are you still kicking some ideas around as, of course, you're coming out with the Nick Saban book now, but we know there may be some future plans for you along with our good friend, Paul Feinbaum.
Yeah, so we'll see, just starting to work on that one, early stages of it. But yeah, so I feel a little bit like Nick Saban, the grind doesn't stop, right? You get through one thing and you got to move on to the next one. I think about a lot. I've got a book launch party coming August 11th, Little Professor. And that's going to be, I'm going to give myself the 24-hour rule that day. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to celebrate it. And then next day it's back to business. I got to work on the next one. So I'm trying to enjoy it, but yeah, there's more work to be done. And, my day job keeps me pretty busy too. And so there's a lot going on right now, but it's an exciting time. And, I'm excited to, work on these projects that hopefully people will enjoy.
Again, the leadership secrets of Nick Saban will be available soon. John, just where can our fans pick up the book, maybe either in person or online?
Yeah, so it comes out August 9th. That's a Tuesday. You can order it anywhere that you order books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, all those different things. Plenty of local bookstores will have it. If they don't, you can ask them, and I'm sure they'll get it in for you. And then I mentioned Little Professor in Homewood, Alabama. That's where I'm having a book launch party. But also, if you wanted an autographed copy, you can order through them. I'm going to be signing a bunch of copies, and they'll start shipping them out the next couple of days. So plenty of different options for you. Anywhere you want to book, you can get it. And again, just so excited for people to get these in their hands real soon.
Looking forward to it, John. Congratulations on completing the book and hopefully a very successful launch. Can't wait to read it. Thank you for joining us today.
Appreciate it.
Congratulations to John Talty on the publication of his book, The Leadership Secrets of Nick Saban, again coming out next week on August 9th. You heard him talk about as well a book launch party coming up at the Little Professor in Homewood, Alabama on August 11th. So congratulations to John on completing that lengthy process to get this book ready. And I think Alabama fans and really just any sports fan will really enjoy learning more about Coach Saban and specifically what helps make him have such a successful organization here with Alabama football. To close out this edition of Crimson Drive driven by NASCAR, we want to talk some basketballs. The Alabama Crimson Tide were able to hold a public practice last week here in Tuscaloosa, and also we have a chance to look at some of that practice footage for the Crimson Tide and hear from Nate Oats as well as Charles Bediako and Noah Gurley about what this upcoming foreign tour will be like as the Crimson Tide are already starting to make their way to Europe, playing 2 games at Barcelona, Spain, 1 game in Paris, France. An exciting trip coming up for Nate Oats and the Crimson Tide men's basketball team.
I'm excited about our team. The foreign trip's turn out to be great. I've seen some itineraries on what we're going to be able to do. I'm excited to. I've never been to Spain. Last time I was in France, I was in college, so it's been a while. I'm excited to make the trip. Our players are excited. I'm excited to get these practices with our guys. They're starting to bond, starting to play well together. Got a lot of new guys that I'm excited about. The returners have gotten better. So it's been a good summer as far as that goes. I think our guys are in the gym working hard, getting better. Now this foreign trip will be a way to get to play 3 quality teams over there. We're not. I think you know me well enough. We're trying to play the best teams we can. We had the #1 strength of schedule in the country last year. When we make this foreign tour, we're actually playing the China national team. We're going to play the Lithuania men's B team, so that'll be good. And then there's a Spain select team that'll have some pros, from Spain. So we got 3 good teams. It'll be good for our guys to play against these pros over there. It'll be good to, you gotta. It's a little different. The 24-second shot clock, I don't think it's going to bother us too much. We don't usually get down to the last 6 seconds anyways. But, there's some different rules. We had FIBA ref in today with a couple SEC guys. Make sure our guys are shoot the coaches. They have to get accustomed to the rules. There's some differences. But, it's still going to be basketball. It's going to be good for our guys. It's going to be a great experience. I'm excited to make the trip. We'll start with Javon because he's not practicing obviously yet. But he is doing great. He's really focused on his rehab, his nutrition. He's getting his body back to where it needs to be. His weight training. I think Henry, our new strength coach, has been great. So Javon's been in there. I think he's right on pace to, we were hoping to have him back by SEC play. We might get him back a little bit earlier. It'd be great if we could get him some non-conference games in before we hit SEC play. So he's doing good. Namari has not been limited for a while now. He can do everything in practice. I think maybe there's a transition drill here or there that Clark, depending on how many days in a row we've gone, just to make sure he's not tired and do it. But he's pretty much full go, and he's looked good too. So he's making shots, he's attacking, he's playing good defense. Jaden Bradley's coming off the foot surgery. He's going to be limited minutes on the foreign tour just to make sure we're smart with it. And he's but we're going 6 days in a row this week. We started Monday and we're going to do an inter-squad scrimmage tomorrow. That'll be open to the public. So this was our 5th day in a row, and we've got the inter-squad scrimmage tomorrow, which is going to be a full 40-minute game. So we tried to make this practice more like a day before a game practice. So there was nothing today that Jaden was limited from doing just because it was limited anyways. In a full practice, if we were going full 2.5 hours, he would be limited to some stuff just to be smart. But you saw he played 6 minutes of our, closest thing to a real game in practice we could get, and he did the full thing. So he's getting there. He's got to get in better shape. It's just he was off basketball for 4 or 5 months, so he's just got to get back in the flow again. But it's coming for him. Darius made it clear to the coaching staff he really wants to be here. He loves Alabama. What was wrong with Darius last year, he took ownership for, wants to fix it. Like, he said all the right things, and we really believed he was trying to change some things to turn himself into the player we think he can be. And so far, he's done a pretty good job with it. I mean, he's coming in the morning, getting early workouts. He's been a vocal leader. He's been playing pretty hard. He was great today in practice. But no, he's been the vocal leader so far. He's the guy that's been in the program the longest. I mean, Javon's been in 1 year longer on his redshirt year, but him and Javon have played, 2 years each, and Javon's not practicing right now. So Darius the only guy practicing right now that's played 2 years for us. So while it's crazy to think he's the most veteran guy on the team, he is.
The coaches have instilled certain principles that all of us have to play by, live by, and part of that is just sharing the rock. So, and the chemistry's good on the court, but also off the court too. Me personally, it doesn't really feel like a new team. I know we only been together a month and some change, but we just spending so much time together, whether it's in the gym or working out as a group. But I say the chemistry going really well so far.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I have been to Paris before, so I'm actually excited to go back over there. And in Spain, I'm really excited. If we get the chance, I do want to go see the Barcelona soccer arena. and that's really going to be exciting. And I think it actually will bring us more closer together as a group, especially, sightseeing together, cultural meetings, and just really bonding. And this trip will also be good for us to see where we are right now as a team against an actual other team.
Good to hear from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nate Oats, and then those players you heard from at the very end. We first heard from Noah Gurley and then Charles Bediako, who's going back to Europe, as you heard about in his final comment there, as we're really excited for the Crimson Tide team to have a trip to Europe. They'll be keeping fans up to date on everything that's going on with the games they have next week in Barcelona and Paris, plus just the overall experience of getting to do some sightseeing as well, available on rolledtide.com. There's going to be a special blog that's kept by the Alabama basketball team about their trip to Europe. So congratulations to those guys on what is going to be a very exciting week plus coming up overseas. Right here, though, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, we are, of course, getting ready for the upcoming season, and the month of August we'll start to have some of our first sports played here on campus, but also we are returning to some of our regular content on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Let's go ahead and take a look at our Wickles weekend schedule. Well, coming up on August 18th, that'll be a really busy time because Hey Coach and the Nick Saban, well, not the Nick Saban show that night, but that'll be coming in a couple weeks. But Hey Coach will return on 6:30 at Baumhower's Victory Grill here in Tuscaloosa. So that'll be our first Hey Coach show. And then Tide TV this week will also debut for this upcoming season, available on rolledtide.com, TV affiliates across the state, and also on the Alabama Athletics YouTube and Facebook pages. So we're excited to bring those shows back. Monday, August 22nd, we'll have the return of Crimson Tide Today. Make sure you download the Alabama Insider podcast, hit subscribe, and you'll get those daily reports on Crimson Tide Today. Then August 28th, it'll be Chris Stewart hosting the Nick Saban television show, as we'll get some insights from Coach Saban on this Alabama football team, get to see some video of practice as well. Of course, September 3rd, that's why we do everything, to get ready for the games. And we will have Alabama against Utah State. 6:30 kickoff. Our coverage on the Crimson Tide Sports Network will begin at 3:30 on the Varsity Network app, and of course our great radio affiliates across the state and the country. Then we'll be talking about it on Labor Day. It'll be the first edition of Crimson Tide Rewind coming up on September 5th from Baumhower's in Vestavia Hills. So we're looking forward to talking about Crimson Tide football, as again, we're now less than a month away. Today is August 4th. As you see, the first game is September 3rd. We are getting closer and closer to kicking it off here in Tuscaloosa. So that's a look at our Wickles weekend update and really just the shows that we have coming up for you on the Crimson Tide Sports Network, including this show, Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. We'll go to twice a week once game week returns leading up to the Utah State game. But until then, in August, we'll have this show for you on Thursdays at 2 p.m. right here on the CTSN Facebook page, streaming live and also archived on YouTube. And then all the conversations that we have for this show are also available to listen to as a podcast on the Alabama Insider Podcast. A great place to go for that podcast is the Varsity Network app. If you go to the Crimson Tide's page, Alabama's page, you'll find the podcast very easy to listen to right there. It's going to wrap up this edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. We got to say a huge thank you to Ethan Carabin for producing this show. Thanks as well to our guest that we had, John Talty, talking about his new book, The Leadership Secrets of Nick Saban, Alabama soccer head coach Wes Hart, plus comments from the Alabama men's basketball team and Nate Oats, as well as the head coach of the Crimson Tide football team, Nick Saban. For everybody with the Crimson Tide Sports Network, this is Roger Hoover saying thank you for watching. Enjoy your weekend. Roll Tide.